Hey everyone, it's Josh Andrew here. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Conversations with Josh Andrew. We're all about leadership, having meaningful conversations, and getting just a little bit better every day. If you've enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and share this podcast. Your support helps us reach more people and continue bringing your great content. Thanks for listening. Let's keep the conversation going. Let's get into this week's episode. All right, guys, welcome to this week's episode of Conversations. We are definitely over 100 episodes, and I'm just super thankful for each and every one of you. Today, we're going to be talking about transitions in ministry. We actually did a video about 6 months ago on this, and it did pretty well. And I just want to go a little bit more in depth and also just talk through our journey a little bit. My wife and I have been through a transition in a church. I've been in a transition in a different church, and she also as well, but us as married couple and actually like leaders in the church went through a transition, and now we're in a church and handle transitions. So I believe this is something that we should talk about more. I don't think we do a great job of giving tools for people's tool belts when it comes to transition, making it healthy, making it right on both sides as a leader, as the follower. What do we do? How do we bring it up? What are we feeling? Is it just our feelings? Is it God? There's so much to it, and I don't think I'm going to be able to cover all of that in 30 minutes, but I do want to at least share a little bit of our story and also give you 7 thoughts around transition to make your life a little bit easier, a little less anxious about this idea. Because, again, as we look, there's one thing I know about ministry of being in almost 10 years. The only thing that is constant is change. There's constantly things. Every single day is a new journey. And it's one, so fun, but then two, we obviously understand that there are real relationships, there's real hurt, there's real things that we talk about. And again, I can only share from my perspective and also just my journey of observing people along the journey. So again, I hope that these 7 thoughts are things you maybe have already thought about, but potentially things that will ignite a healthy conversation with you, with your leader. Maybe you are the leader talking about transition with your board or whatever. So again, I just want to give you 7 thoughts and submit these to you because again, I believe we don't do a great job of talking about transition. I think you have 2 spectrums, right? You have the closet transition where the person does it behind the scenes and you don't know anything. And then we also, within the actual pastor space, it almost seems like we are having NIL deals across different colleges, and it's like we got to make this huge announcement and like to further, this is the church that I chose, and it's like every 6 months you're doing that. That's obviously not really healthy. So again, this is just more general, and I believe the Holy Spirit will do his job, and I'm going to do mine. So number 1, honor the work God did before you, even if it wasn't perfect. You have to honor the past. I don't care if you were on staff or you're a servant leader for 6 months, you have to be able to look back at and see all that God did. Now I know there is tremendous pain, there is tremendous hurt. Even if there isn't tremendous pain and hurt, there is very much so a conversation and all of that stuff that's going to be had. But more than anything, not just more than anything, just you in general. You as a person, when you are thinking about transitioning out of your ministry role, transitioning to a new city, moving to a new city, whatever, you have to know and be grateful for all that God did. Transitions are not all about just erasing the past, but about building on top of it. Man, what can I learn from this season? What can I grow from? What can I be thankful that God did? You got to acknowledge that God was at work. You could have been in the worst situation, the worst manipulation, and God could still do something super special in and through people. Even if it's just you, he did something in you. So regardless of our opinions on previous leadership, on the theology, on anything and everything else besides yourself and God, you have to get to a point of humility to say, wow, even in the midst of me not agreeing with what's happening, God still is at work. And this humility sets a stage for trust and forward momentum. We got to be humble and we got to honor the past. Again, transitions are inevitable. It's going to happen. Even if transition internally, you're moving to a different role, you're moving to a different team, you have a different title, transitions are inevitable. They're going to happen. But my question to you is, are you honoring the past? And honoring, by the way, the people in your past. Because a lot of times, to be honest, the people that you honor in the past will stay in the past. They might go with you in the season that you're moving into, and that's okay. You have to know that there are people that will be with you for the rest of your life, but then there will also be people that were just season. And something that my wife and I were able to see very quickly as we transition out of our last biggest role besides what we're doing now in church planning in Phoenix, we saw that there was relationships that were simply built off of what we were doing together. And by the way, that's not bad. You got to have working relationships, but where the gap ends up happening is when you assume that relationship was more than just what you were doing. I think that's where relationships get a little weird with transitions. But again, even in all of the chaos, the problems, the good, the bad, the ugly, you have to be able to get to a place where you honor all that God did in and through you, but also the people that you were building with. So number one, honor the work God did in the past. But number two, vision isn't optional. You honor the past, but you're most loyal to your future. Vision isn't optional. Without it, people will look for leadership elsewhere. In the midst of transition, even yourself, you are the leader. You are a leader. You're born a leader. You have a specific influence God gave you. So you got to know that vision leaks. And also, I honor the past, but I'm most loyal to the future. I'm most loyal to where God exists, and that's in my future. So again, you gotta have a clear vision for the future, and people follow clarity, and without it, they may seek other places with stronger direction. Vision energizes and unites people for what's to come. So this is more for the leader, less of the person transitioning out. You got to have vision. You got to have vision in transitions. We were a part of a transition, of a lead pastor transition. We were not in the midst of that, but we obviously were a part of that. Our campus shut down. There was a lot of stuff that happened. But seeing the byproduct of a lead pastor transition. So one lead pastor transition out. We had an interim. That interim became a lead pastor. In all of that, what you want to have that I've learned is clarity. You got to be so clear with the people who said yes to one vision, and don't assume that they're saying yes to your vision. That's where we miss out, and that's where we assume that's not humility. Because again, we should honor the past, but we're most loyal to our future. So people follow clarity, and if you don't provide clarity, people will look in other places to find that. And that, to me, is a scary place as a leader, because I know I could have the coolest, biggest vision on the planet. Yet, if I don't give clarity and strong direction, there will be no energy and there will be no unity. You got to have both to win. You got to have energy. You got to have the natural momentum behind your back, and you got to have unity. People are looking for that. Vision is not optional, like I said. So number one, I'm going to be honoring what God did in the past. But then two, if I'm the one transitioning out, I need to know what my personal vision is. And I need to know what I'm looking for. Because you should never transition out of something without a plan. Even if the plan is to take a break, to take a rest, to just get a normal job and attend service with your wife and your kids, that's beautiful. That's a plan. That's a vision. So when you have a vision for your family and for yourself, it should provide energy and clarity and unity. So if your family doesn't have vision, doesn't have energy, and doesn't have clarity, it's a clear tell sign that you are not being clear with your vision. So I just want to submit those two thoughts again to you. Let's honor the past. Let's honor all that God did in and through people, even if we don't agree with them. But then two, let's have a vision. Like, have a personal vision for yourself, for your family, for the future church, for your role in the body. Again, that's most of the time where transitions live in the church, in my experience, is there's just a gap of vision. And that's not bad. Two visions can be right. That's where people don't realize that it's okay. That's not bad. That you have this vision, they have this vision. That's literally Paul and Silas and Peter. all these guys, Barnabas, like all these guys are going, hey, I love what you're doing. It's just not the way I want to do it. So I'm going to go do this and you're going to do this and we're both going to win. That's beautiful. That's unity. Unity is not conformity, and unity doesn't mean that I have to agree with everything. We do have to find common ground in the majors, not the minors. The major should be Jesus, obviously. So number 3, don't wait until it's too late. Initiate open and honest conversations early. I would suggest the second you start sensing something, you have to bring in your pastor. Even if, by the way, that isn't what they want to hear at that moment. It's not about them. I didn't have a great experience with this because I did follow this rule. I sensed something and I immediately brought it to my pastor. What I was brought with was not a listening ear. I was brought with 100 reasons why I was wrong. And potentially, by the way, there were things that I was wrong in, 100%. I was receptive to that. I chewed on it. I even prayed on it. And my wife and I sat in it for a couple more months until we knew it was pressing on us even more. So again, you got it. The second you feel something, we have to have an open dialogue. And by the way, you have to be willing to listen. That takes humility to go, hey, I might be wrong in this, but this is just what I'm sensing. And most of the time, by the way, a leader who actually has clarity, humility, and some sort of emotional intelligence, they would be able to go, yes, I agree. That does make sense. Because us as leaders, by the way, we live like this with people. We don't live like this. You live like this, you will not have people around you. You'll burn your church to the ground, 100%. Because we live like this, because we are not owners, we are stewards. I'm not an owner of a human being. I don't own anyone, but I am a steward of who God brings us. So live open-handed, don't live closed for the leader. But you as the person listening to this, when you're going, I'm sensing a transition. I'm sensing that I'm not supposed to be in this role. I'm sensing that this is too much for me on my plate. If you don't communicate that, your leader won't know. You have to be proactive in your communication. Whether you're a leader, leaving, or the one coming in, transparent communication months in advance is crucial to managing expectations and avoiding unnecessary tensions. You want to have tension in your team. You want to have tension in your church. You want to have division. Don't be an open communicator. Everything lives in your head. And what ends up happening is it ends up coming out of your heart, and that will be on your tongue. So your tongue will have division. Your tongue will have frustration, bitterness, we'll talk about later. All of that stuff happens because you don't initiate open, honest conversations. And I'm not saying your leader is going to be receptive. I'm not saying your leader is going to be a good listener. I'm not saying they're going to facilitate that in a healthy way. You have to know what and when and how to share it. 100%. Be self-aware. You don't have to share all your dreams with people, by the way. That's where I think we get a little weird, is when you assume that I have to share all of my dreams with you. Because a lot of times, by the way, insecure leaders will ruin your dreams. They'll push it down. They'll put it down. And that's not the type of leader I want to be. I want to be the Jesus type of leader where he said, follow me and I will make you fishers of men. The first couple words of that is your responsibility as a leader. Follow me and I will make you blank. Whatever God's designed them to be, his divine design on them, that's our responsibility to help cultivate that. That's your job. Your job is not to be a hoarder of human beings or an owner of human beings. Your job is to be a steward of whoever and whenever God brings you people. So you have to be transparent. You have to be honest and open. So if you can be honest, you can be transparent. Now, what's going to be happening is you're doing your part. I had a conversation when we were in the midst of a transition, the same transition I'm talking about. And to be honest, it was a lot of tension. I was really nervous. I didn't feel great about how we were being treated. So I ended up getting a phone call with a pastor in Florida. And one, so thankful for you, Pastor. I know you're listening to this. But two, they did a great job of affirming and also making sure I was aligned with what's happening. So I shared what was going on, and I said this, and I'm sure you've thought this as well if you're listening to this. I'm just really worried that once I get to heaven, once God approaches me, I approach God, and he goes, you did that wrong. You transitioned wrong. You did something wrong in that. There was dishonor. There was disunity. You caused a lot of division, and I know I'm going to be accountable for that transition. And the pastor said to me, yes, and your pastor is going to be held accountable to how he's treating you. And that was one of the very first times where it actually clicked in my mind, oh, I'm not the only person responsible for this. And that's something that I want to submit to you is you're not the only one responsible for this. So don't feel like you have to carry the weight of this or you're being mistreated. It's all your fault. That's not true at all. And pastors listening to this, you will be held accountable to how you treat people in their most vulnerable state, which is their biggest dreams, their biggest visions, stuff that honestly they're feeling spiritually. If we don't steward that well, you will be held accountable to that on earth and in heaven, by the way. So you have to be honest, open, and transparent. Number 4, guide them through it. Mentorship during transition is not a bonus. It's a responsibility. A lot of pastors, a lot of churches use this as a weapon to teach people. That's not great. People are human beings. They're not projects. But you have a duty to mentor those transitioning in and out of roles. Offering wisdom and support throughout the process not only strengthens relationships, but ensures transition honors both the outgoing and incoming. So honor is mutual in this. If you're transitioning out and there's an agreement, and in our experience, we got ghosted for 2 months, that's not really healthy. That's not really honoring downward. It's just honoring upward. We got ghosted, and the whole time we're like, I thought our pastor was with us. I thought he was praying for us. There could have been so many opportunities for wisdom, support, encouragement, and me learning from that 2 years later. Any moment I have to meet with any of our team, to sit at a coffee and hear somebody's dreams and be a vault for people, I'm going to offer wisdom and support, not unsolicited advice, obviously. But if they're asking about something or I can tell there's a vulnerability or a weakness, I'm definitely going to make sure they feel seen. They feel not responsible to carry it all by themselves. Lex and I are going to be praying with them. We're going to be encouraging them in the midst of that. And the person transitioning into their role, into their position, is also going to be mentored and supported in that. So we have to be guides in those moments. If we let people, because what ends up happening, this is just the brutal honesty, you get offended and upset because you think they're leaving you. They're not leaving you. They're being obedient to the call God put on their life. And most of the time, our eyes are filtered through insecurity. So we don't know what's God and what's not. And we have to be so okay with knowing sometimes things just happen, but also sometimes God really does send people. God really does send somebody to a different city. He sends them to a different church. That's beautiful, and we should be aware of that. We should support them, and we should offer wisdom when possible. Number 5, celebration should replace goodbyes. Leave with honor, not bitterness. I've read this illustration a couple times, and I think it's really, really honestly on par. Most of the transitions I've ever experienced feel more like funerals than they do weddings. They feel like funerals. Something's dying. A dream is dying. A friendship is dying. A potential is dying. It should feel more like a wedding. Or you could say it like this. It should feel more like a graduation than a breakup. That person's just graduating. And if you live like a steward, not an owner of humans, you know that they're graduating. They're going to their next level. They're going to a new step, a new level in their faith, in their journey, in their influence, in their leadership. And we should be able to celebrate that. We should be able to celebrate the moments we had together. We should be able to make sure they feel special and make sure they know they always have a seat at our table with our church or not. Celebrations create a sense of unity. They create a sense of hope. And obviously, more celebration than a loss. It's not a loss. It's not a loss to deposit something into somebody. It's not a deposit to make somebody feel special and seen. It's healthy. It's what we should be doing. It's not a loss when we can celebrate people. Those celebrations should feel more like a graduation than a breakup. It's not a breakup. We're not breaking up. We are not in a blood covenant. We're not in a crazy mutual. It's like, hey, I'm moving to a different city. I have to move. Maybe you have a family member sick, or you're taking care of a new responsibility of a parent or whatever. You have to be able to go, okay, I'm not an owner of them. I'm a steward of them. When there's a mutual celebration too, by the way, you the one transitioning out, you should, like the point number 1, you should be able to celebrate and honor everything God did in and through that season. So again, celebrations should replace goodbyes. You got to leave with honor, not with bitterness. And by the way, we all, most of the time, We always assume the person leaving is the one carrying bitterness. Oftentimes, in my experience, it's the primary person who's responsible for that transition who potentially is carrying bitterness. And that will carry on to the fruit of your ministry. If you look at the fruit, just look at the root. Most of the time, if it's not growing, it's dying. And if it's dying, there's obviously something that needs to be pruned. There's something that needs to be cut out or something added, new water, new hydration, new whatever. So again, we got to celebrate. It's a graduation. It's not a breakup. Last two here, give people room to fail and come back. Here we go. Transitions are messy. Not every change will be perfect, and sometimes people will have false starts. Also, some people can be wrong. You have to allow for grace in this process so that failure doesn't feel final. Failures are not final. You're not a failure. You're not a mistake. You made a mistake. That doesn't mean you are one. And I would be the worst leader on the planet if I continue to reiterate your mistakes, not what God says about you, what I believe about you, and encourage you. So flexibility creates an environment where people can grow through change. So if somebody transitions out and they believe it and I just sense wrong and they're still not listening, I have to be willing to go, okay, I'll be here. The clear example here in the Bible, the lost son, what ends up happening? The dad goes, hey, here's your inheritance. Go. That's great. I'll be here. The dad didn't run off chasing him, begging him, lowering his standards, lowering his values, changing the vision of the house, changing the vision of their family. He stood on the porch. He stayed in his house. He stayed responsible. He didn't lower his responsibilities, and he waited. And when the son returned from eating pig slop and basically being a slave at that point, they celebrated. They were so for it. They threw a party. There wasn't, hey, why did you do this? I'm right, you're wrong. There was no shame involved. There was no mistakes pointed at. There was grace allowed. And we have to know that is how we should treat people as well. People are going to fail you. People are going to make mistakes. You are going to fail people, and you are going to make mistakes. My question to you is, are you giving people the grace that you wish you would have when you make mistakes? So when you make mistakes, what type of grace do you want from people around you? You should start giving people that grace, because failures are not final. We know all things work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to his purpose. So we know somehow in the midst of this bad transition, somehow in the midst of this crazy argument, God still is going to use it. And by the way, he will. My wife and I had a very, very messy transition. We had a lot of gossip about us, a lot of behind the scenes stuff that was happening that we tried our best to cover and did not make it a big deal. And somehow God still used it. God still used it to prune us, to help us get healthy, to get us to not look at titles or people as our final point of identity, honestly, and getting to a point of understanding God chose us, God called us, and he's going to use us no matter where we are. And we're going to be used by God because we are not a gift to God's bride. We are a tool that simply is going to be used by God wherever, whenever, however, we're down. And we're going to be there. We're going to be faithful. We're going to be available. And we're going to be teachable. So last, to reiterate, point number 6, give people room to fail and to come back. Number 7, last one, don't hold on to your roles. Prepare others to take your place. You transitioning out. If you could even get 1% of this, 1, you'll be a better leader if you stay, but then 2, if you leave, people will leave, you will leave, and people will go, that was a great leader. I'm glad he was in our life. You should always replace yourself. A lot of times, by the way, I wouldn't even suggest you pick the person that you're replacing because you're not going to have to deal with the consequences of that human being. The leader is. So work with the leader to find the person who's going to be your successor, and whoever that is, there should be time that you guys work together, that you guys build together, that you guys help train and equip them. The best leaders work themselves out of a job. Even if you stay in your church or you stay in your job, you want to be the best leader in the room, work yourself out of one. Work yourself out of a job. There will always be room for you. There's always room for you. Not in every church, I understand that, or every space. There's a lot of, I understand that's a very general statement. But there truthfully is, in the kingdom of God, there's always room for you. So preparing others to lead is the ultimate test of your leadership. By the way, this is pretty simple, but if you call yourself a leader, turn around. Do you have any followers? Because by definition, a leader is somebody who has followers. And if you turn around and there's nobody following you, or they're following you because you're titled, not because you're actually a leader, then that's a clear tell sign. It's probably not time for you to transition out. Or it is because you're just not doing your job. That's another side of the coin as well. A true legacy is not holding in power, but empowering others to continue the mission. The mission isn't about you. You are not mission critical. I hate to break it to you. I'm not mission critical. I'm so replaceable. And I love that because I don't want to carry the weight of this. I want God to carry the weight that he's supposed to, and I'm going to carry the weight I'm supposed to, which is my assignment, my obedience to God and to my leader, my pastor, and the vision that I am in unity with in our context. So again, don't hold on to your role. Don't be married to roles. Don't be married to ideas. Don't be married to methods. The best leaders work themselves out of jobs. So if you're thinking about transitioning out of ministry, or you believe God's called you to do something else, how great would it be if you went to your pastor and he sensed it as well? You guys had a great conversation and you said, hey, I have 5 people today that could take my job and they would do it better than me. That's the type of leader, by the way, that we want to keep around, because they're people who constantly replace themselves. They constantly are empowering and building up people. They're not being married to roles. They're not being married to their legacy, their identity, their influence within that local church. Because to be honest, that is such a thing in our cultural context. People love being micro celebrities. People love to feel like they are the primary follower or primary influence in their congregation. That is cool in the financial district in New York, not cool in the local church, because we are not the prize. Again, you are not a gift. I'm not a gift. I'm so replaceable. God could replace me tomorrow in our local context of Valley Church in Phoenix, and it would be 100% just fine. It's honestly super humbling. I remember we transitioned out of our role in Omaha, and I was sitting in California. I didn't have a role. I didn't have anything. I had a job, and I had my wife, and I had our church, and I had our best friends. And it clicked in my mind. I was replaced by great people, some of our best friends in the world, and I love them so much. But I'm truthfully replaceable. And sometimes that can make you feel insecure. I understand that. It shouldn't, though. It shouldn't make you secure to know I don't have to carry the weight of this thing. I can carry the weight of which I'm supposed to be, which is I'm a tool, not a gift. I'm a vessel in God's kingdom. And vessels do not have to be clean. They just need to be empty. To me, I'm going to be empty. I'm going to be available to what God has for me. So those are some 7 thoughts that I believe will truthfully help both sides, the leader and the follower, in the midst of transition. I want to give a couple just last thoughts here. Transitions are hard. Both sides, I understand. We have to be willing to give grace to both people. 99% of people don't have ill intent. If somebody's transitioning out of a role, they're moving to a new city, there's not a crazy level of wickedness attached to it. Most of the time, in my experience, they simply are just human beings going on their journey, and God is going to use them in an incredible way. We are stewards of people, not owners, and most of the time, the damage happens because there was an insecure leader in a position of authority who used their authority as a weapon. Like I said earlier, God will hold them accountable just as much as he's going to hold you accountable to how you treat people when you're transitioning out. This does not give us room to gossip. This does not give us room to hold bitterness in our heart. This does not give us room to do anything else besides be obedient, be great listeners, and allow God to use it all. Thank you for listening to this week's episode. I appreciate each and every one of you. I believe you have tremendous value to add to the kingdom, to your local church, to your local business. I believe together, if we continue to have conversations, we continue to have open dialogues in the church, we'll be more healthy, we'll grow, and we'll make a difference together. We'll see you next week.